And then finally, educational outreach. So in the age of COVID, we've been online. We try to keep different programs like the Wild Speaker Series here for you guys. Tonight, we have Samantha Rubinson. She's going to explain a little bit about the Nevada Site Stewardship Program. And I will turn the floor over to her and she can begin her presentation. Thank you for being here with us.
Hello, everybody. Just getting the share started and the presentation. There we go. So, hi, my name is Samantha Rubinson. I run the Nevada Site Stewardship Program for the Nevada State Historic Preservation Office. And I basically coordinate the program from Las Vegas, the state program. I'm here today a little bit. So during this talk, I'm going to tell you about the stewardship program, give you a little bit of the history of Nevada, talk about the type of damage that happens to archaeological sites, and what you can do about it, and how you can get involved, as well as talking a little bit about the associated activities we have. Oh, sorry. I saw the chat going, and for some reason it kicked me out of the position. Okay. The Nevada program has been part of Nevada law since 2005. The program is a group of trained volunteers who monitor archaeological sites for state and federal agencies. We basically provide an opportunity for volunteers to get involved in Nevada's history, assist public land managers in monitoring at-risk sites, and while they're monitoring, also recording, and then educate the public on the importance of preserving cultural resources. So we work with we work with a whole bunch of the major agencies who manage land in Nevada. 5 of the different federal agencies, including the Bureau of Land Management, the National Park Service, Fish and Wildlife, and the Forest Service, as well as a couple of different state agencies. We're currently building programs with the Nevada State Parks and with the Nevada Division of Wildlife. And we're hoping with state parks that will be all over the state, but right now we're mostly focused on Lincoln County, and then we're going to expand from there. We also are working with some of the other counties and trying to get programs set up for them. And each of them is unique, and each of them has unique resources. And so there's all kinds of different opportunities. We work all over the state. We have sites that we monitor all over the state. So it doesn't matter really where you live to whether or not that there's opportunities there. We also encourage our stewards when they're traveling to let us know, and we can actually tell them, hey, there's a couple of state sites that you can go check out when you're traveling. So what stewards do? Stewards go through a mandatory 6-hour training that tells them how to be site stewards, gives them a history of Nevada, gives them a much more in-depth look than what I'm going to give you today, and goes through all the safety and emergency response and all the stuff that you need to do in order to be out there. Then we assign the stewards and introduce them to sites. It's a bit of a matchmaker, trying to find a steward who fits the right site so that they like going out there. And then they're supposed to go out and monitor the sites quarterly and send us reports. And what we basically ask for is reports of any changes to the site from the last time they went out there. And we do have other volunteer opportunities. I'm going to talk a little bit about those at the end. So site stewards, we on average have about 350 site stewards. We have trained over the years over 2,000 volunteers. But volunteers come and go, so we see them occasionally, and then they go off and find other things to do. But um, I've got some really amazing ones who have been here and been with me the entire 9.5 years I've been running the program. We cover about 400 sites, and as you can see on, even though it's a little out of date, this little graph basically says we do a lot of site visits, at least 500, approximately 500 site visits every year, and we dedicate a heck of a lot of volunteer hours as a result of that. And it's just all up to stewards wanting to go out and wanting to see these sites and wanting to protect them. The reason why we steward, if you're looking at this map, and I know it's small on a lot of people's screens, um, the white areas are private land. All of the other areas on the map are public land. So 84% of the state of Nevada is public land, which means that there are millions of acres for the archaeologists and patrol officers to monitor. And I have a thing here. It says 12 million acres per special agent for the BLM. They're kind of like the police detectives for the BLM. And I think there's only 3 of them in the state right now. And they cover like any major problems that happen anywhere in the state. They have to cover those things. And it's hard for them to keep their eyes on all the sites. And our state database of archaeological sites has over 140,000 sites are listed in the database. And so monitoring all that, I mean, we're never going to be able to do that. What we do is we monitor the at-risk sites, the sites that most need volunteers to monitor them, the ones that are very important and very significant. And so we kind of focus on those. But still, I wish we could do more than we do, but we can only do so much. I'm going to tell you a little bit history of Nevada. So not, well, actually, kind of. I'm just going to show you the types of sites we have. So prehistoric Nevada, people have been in Nevada as far back as 11,000 years. And they've been living, for the most part, in things such as rock shelters. They were a lot more hunter-gatherer. We didn't have any real, we have a couple of pueblos, but they are in the southeastern corner of the state, and that's it. The majority of the peoples who lived here either lived in rock shelters or in areas where there were trees and wickiups. And so they were moving around a lot. They weren't building structures to stay in one spot. We have game traps, so areas where they've built traps to keep game from running through so they can catch them in one spot. And we have roasting pits. These were, we call them agave roasting pits, but they were roasting a bunch of different things where they would collect the different types of plants and stuff they'd want to roast, and they would take a whole bunch of limestone and charcoal and get it really hot, and then put the plants in and the things that they wanted to roast in, then cover it with some of those hot stones, and then leave it to slow roast. And then later on, dig it up and eat whatever they cooked. And then they do it again. Now, whenever they did that, the limestone turned bright white and was not usable again. It wouldn't hold the heat in. So they have to go get more limestone. So this pile that we call roasting pits is basically every time they added more limestone to it, it just got bigger. And then they dig out the center. So a lot of times they kind of look like donuts, where you see a lot of ash and white limestone and then a dip in the middle where they were cooking things. And we have these all over southern Nevada. We also have petroglyphs, which are pecked in rock art, or rock writings as they call them these days. And pictographs, which are painted on. This particular pictograph is one of the few, we have very few, that has multiple different colors in it. For the most part, a lot of times you find them and they're going to be like a red ochre, but this one's really special, and it's here in southern Nevada, and it's really awesome to be able to go and see. Ceramics. So talking about the artifacts that they had, um, a good portion of the state where there were prehistoric ceramics, like the one that you see here. But we do have in the north western part of the state where they use more basketry than ceramics. We also have lithics, so the stone tools or the manufacturing stuff that comes off of stone when they're making stone tools. Ground stone, so they would use this, they would take a big stone, which we call metate, and take a small stone called a mono, and they use the mono to grind things on the metate, and this would be like mesquite beans and corn and stuff like that. Then historic Nevada is, if you're northern Nevada, it's 120 year, it's from the 1820s. And if you're in southern Nevada, when people were here more around the 1860s and on. We have a lot of mines. There was a lot of mining. There still is a lot of mining in this state. So there's a lot of old mines and old mining areas. Such as there's a lot of, especially we have a bunch of ghost towns in the middle of the state and in northern parts of the state where the mining was going on, and they would have this whole town, and then as soon as the mining disappeared because there were no resources to mine anymore, the town would either be abandoned or all the stuff from the town is taken to wherever the new mine is and the new place where they're doing the mining activities. And so we have a lot of ghost towns where it's either a whole bunch of the old buildings or it's just where all the foundations are, where the place used to be. We have structures, stone structures, wooden structures all over the state. A lot of which were associated with mining towns, but with various other things as well. Cemeteries. I have quite a few cemeteries that we steward, including this one, which is Gold Hill, which is south of Virginia City in northern Nevada. Can scatters. We don't monitor these exclusively. We normally check on them when they're near something else because they're not that exciting. But if you are a historic archaeologist like me and you want to know how many people were living in an area, how long were they living in that area, and what kind of food they were having during the historic period, you could go to a can scatter and you can find all the types of food. You can date how old all the cans are. You can figure out, okay, what kind of population would it take to eat enough of this stuff in order to create this big pile, and be able to figure out, what kind of stuff are they importing to be able to eat. And it's really awesome when you find a can of sardines that come from Portugal that they were eating in the late 1800s. And you never think somebody in the middle of Nevada somewhere was randomly eating a can of sardines that came from Portugal. It's just not something that people think about. But it makes it really interesting for those of us to be able to think about all those different aspects when we look at a can scatter. But I would never, since I run a volunteer program where we monitor things, I wouldn't just assign you to this.
Samantha?
Yes.
I hate to interrupt, but I'm noticing a comment on Facebook. Scott Sparrow, he's saying that this is litter. So can you explain to Scott and maybe some other people why this wouldn't be considered litter?
Okay. That's a very good comment and question. So how's the best way to put it? Historic trash is litter, but if it's over 50 years old, it's considered historic, and it becomes a harder thing to be able to just go and pick up and clean up, because it also tells us a history of our state. What you do end up with, though, when you have a can scatter like this, and you can see, and I can see from here, that there's a whole bunch of modern stuff in here because people see trash and they add to it. Same thing happens when we have graffiti. People see graffiti and they add to it. So a lot of times when we have a historic can scatter, we get a lot of modern trash on top of it. but the historic stuff tells us a lot about historic people who were historically there. So these sites are protected, and for the most part, they're protected to a certain point. They're protected until there's archaeologists who can go out there and look at it and collect as much data as we can about the time period when it was left before before they go and do a cleanup to pick it up. But even though it is technically what you would look at as litter, when it's over 50 years old, especially like this one, which is going to be, well, this one's probably 60 or 70 years old. It tells us a lot about what Nevada was like 60 or 70 years ago. And so it does become a research tool as well as just being trash. Okay. So talking about the types of things we get that are historic, we have historic glass. And I've had stewards who looked at this and went, I was alive when we would drink that. It's like, yeah, but now it's considered historic. We have the cans. I don't know where the other ones went. And we have historic ceramics, but we don't get a lot of those because you only get them in settlements. And for some reason, people like to keep their ceramics. So why do we protect cultural resources? We do it because we want to preserve things, but also in 1979, they created the Archaeological Resource Protection Act. And it is the law that that prohibits selling, purchasing, trafficking, excavating archaeological resources on federal lands, and protects those resources and makes sure that people who do offend, who do loot these places or damage these places, can be prosecuted for them. We also have non-federal public lands laws that cover state and local resources, and they too have punishments of imprisonment and fines as well. And ultimately, we also have the whole ethics, like, as you guys should know, because of your wilderness, the things that you guys look for and do is stewarding in the wilderness. We have a lot of other things where it's tread lightly, to think about, don't disturb these resources, keep these things in place. Because respect that they're there, because if we disturb these and destroy these, then there isn't anything for our children to learn about when they're out there. So what kind of impacts do we have? We have things such as destruction of rock art. These were a whole bunch of figurines in this rock shelter, and somebody didn't like them so much that she scratched all of them out. And I say she because they were so angry about it, they lost a nail, and they were able to get DNA off that nail. Graffiti. We had a lot of graffiti. This was a massive graffiti case that happened about 10, 11 years ago in Red Rock, where some kid decided that they wanted to put graffiti all over this rock shelter, and then on the sides of the cliff that's around the corner from it, and you could see it from the road. And he was kind enough to put his graffiti signature on it, and the same graffiti signature that he used when he was doing graffiti in town, and they were able to track him based on his signature to figure out who did it. I wish all cases were like that, but they're not. Tire tracks, there's a lot of places where you're going to see signs that say no vehicles. And you may not recognize that you're on an archaeological site, but it is a certain level of respect. And you guys, like I said, as friends of Nevada Wilderness, you know that there's got to be limitations on these things. And the same thing works when it comes to archaeology. Material collection. This was a grave in Gold Butte that during the whole Bundy issue that was going on out there, some people decided they'd go dig it up because they were hoping that the body that was buried there was buried with a shotgun, with the guy's shotgun, which, by the way, it wasn't. But they were kind enough to leave it wide open like this when they left. It has been since reinsured and recovered over and taken care of and cleaned up. But it was a really big hit for preservation, and also just like, how rude is that? Like, that's just not something you do. So how can you guys help with all of this? Well, you can enjoy artifacts where they're found. If you're out and you're in these wilderness areas and you're walking around and you find stuff, it's great. It's really awesome to be able to go, hey, I found an archaeological artifact, or I found a site. But it really needs to stay where it is, so that way somebody else can come out there and enjoy it. I heard a comment from one of the Paiute in Southern Paiute. His comment was that these things, they know that these things are out here. They know that their artifacts are sitting on the ground. They know that these sites exist, and they have existed for over 1,000 years. And there's a reason why they never went out and collected that stuff themselves, because they believe it belongs there. And so when we, who are not affiliated with the people who left it there, go and collect it, we're taking a part of what they believe is their history and their culture and a whole bunch of that stuff. And so you don't even realize that you're hurting an entire other group of people by picking up this artifact that you found on the ground. Respect the rock art. There are a lot of people who go up to the rock art as soon as they see it, put their hands on it. So please don't. The oils from your hands can cause damage to the rock art. So give yourself a little bit of different distance from that if you can. Respect why it's there. One of the problems that we have most, because like you said, I run a program where we're reporting damage. A lot of graffiti happens where there's rock art, and we think that that's because a lot of people don't recognize that it's rock art. They think it's graffiti as well. And just like trash on the ground, if people see that it's okay to have graffiti there, they add graffiti to it. So part of the thing is also educate people about rock art, so that people know that that is important, and it's a historic thing or prehistoric thing. It's been there for a long time, and it's important to leave as it is. But also, let's dissuade for anybody from wanting to do graffiti anyway. A base signage. Signage is really important. A lot of people don't realize that they're in an archaeological area if they don't know what they're looking for. And so there is a lot of this kind of signage out here. And take photos, not things. The beautiful thing about when you go to an archaeological site is you can take pictures as much as you want. And you can even, like we say, it's okay, you can pick up the artifacts and look at them, but put them back down and leave them there. But also try to encourage your kids, your family members, all of those to have that feeling as well of taking photos and not things. When you do take photos, however, one of the things we try to encourage you to do, anybody to do, especially our stewards to do, is don't take photos of all the archaeological site and the landmarks and horizon in the same photo and put it on the web, because people can triangulate where the site is by looking at what all the hills and mountains and stuff in the distance are, and be able to figure out where you're actually at. And I was at a meeting or at a conference, and somebody was doing a presentation on certain types of rock art. And 2 years later, some guy came up to me, or one of the stewards came up to me and said, I finally found where she was talking about. And I was like, that slide was up for all of 2 minutes. Did you take a picture of it? And then he had to triangulate based on what all the landmarks were and everything like that, where that is. And he finally found that site. And it was up in a conference for 2 minutes. So never underestimate how far people are going to go to try to find the site. So what we suggest to do is, if you're going to take pictures of an archaeological site, turn the GPS off and take a picture up close where you don't see the horizon or the hills around it or anything like that. Kind of like the one that I have here that's on the right. it just protects the site from people going out and looting them or too much traffic or anything like that. Get involved. We do trainings all the time for the Nevada Site Stewardship Program, and we love to have people who are already interested in preservation involved with us. So if you're interested in becoming a site steward, please give me a call or give me an email, because I put my email here. Go to our website and have a look, and let us know. And we're always happy to have more site stewards. We also, if you don't want to become a site steward, but you're out and about anyway, if you find damage to an archaeological site that you come across and you want to report it, here is a phone number and an email and a website, especially the website that we have. It's our reporting website, and it has this damage to site form, and it can be anonymous, but it's just basically give us an idea of where the site was, what damage was happened to it, and and any other information you can give us, observations you can give us about what was going on. And we will try, because I do work with a large percentage of the archaeologists for the entire state. We will, if we can have a coordinates, or if we can have a really good description of where it is, we will try to find the land manager for that site and tell them what's going on so that they can respond to it. So definitely let us know that you found something that needs to be taken care of, and we can work to find out who it needs to be told to get it taken, protected. So
Also, we're at a pause. Scott on Facebook almost wanted to clarify this, but his question was, um, he said if someone was there and they left something before, does that mean people today don't get to use it? And I think he's referring to those tire tracks. So
uh,
if you kind of explain what limited use versus for protection of archaeological sites mean.
yeah. If somebody, so if you find tracks and stuff like that, um, just because somebody left a track doesn't mean it was officially okay to leave it there. A lot of management, when it comes to managing wilderness management and also just land management, is trying to focus traffic into specific directions, so that way it doesn't come across, or it doesn't go across an area where it's going to hurt the resources. And so even though there might have been a couple of people, or people drive over it a couple of times enough that it looks like a road, doesn't mean that it's officially a road. Um, and a lot of times you'll also find that when they can do it, land managers try to put like rocks across it and stuff like that, so that way you don't think that it's official. So when it comes to driving through, always realize that there's a lot of people who like to make their own roads in the desert. That doesn't mean that that's the appropriate way to go when it comes to where tire tracks are and stuff.
And
When it comes, is
I was
that
gonna
what?
say, and it's not that you can't visit the area. It's just that you
Mhm.
you should be walk. You should be on foot. You should be treading lightly because
Yeah.
it's an archaeological site.
Yes.
More,
So
yeah. So it's
yeah,
not that
no,
you can't use it. It's just your
yeah,
access to it is limited to your feet.
yeah, and also there are probably roads to get to those areas that are appropriate, and you can find them on maps, and those are the appropriate ways to get there. But yes, you can always, if there isn't an official road, um, getting out and hiking to go to a place and be able to check it out is completely appropriate and reasonable. The only places, I mean, it's public land. So public land doesn't mean that you can't go to places. Public land means that you have the ability as a public to be able to access it. It's just that you may not be able to access it in a road that's not considered official. And that's just because the road is not one of the ones where they're trying to be able to take care of the area. Like they have designated ones for a reason. It's just to focus traffic.
Yeah. Thank you.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So other activities that our stewards also do, we do workshops We do normally when it's not pandemic, we have all kinds of different hands-on workshops. We do a lot of graffiti removal. We've done a bunch of trainings on graffiti removal, and we have a bunch of our stewards who do graffiti removal on a regular basis all over the state. We go to events and have event booths, and we do a lot of educational classes and stuff for the site stewards to try to train them on everything from GIS to how to make prehistoric pottery to what the history of specific areas are. So we try to provide information like that. And for now, we are doing a monthly speaker series on topics to do with archaeology and in the state of Nevada and the history of archaeology in Nevada. Finally, we have a lot of public outreach that we do as well. And so we have a junior ranger book that we created for Lincoln County, but it applies to most of Nevada. We've done a lot of different types of outreach, including things where we've done like the coloring pages that you get in at restaurants and stuff like that. We went through all of Lincoln County and Clark County, and we're handing these out to all the small regional areas to be able to try to put these in restaurants, so that way when recreators were out in Overton and they were eating at Sugars and places like that, they'd be sitting there and they would be able, their kids would be coloring on it and the parents would be reading it. So if your kids coloring on something, you're going to want to know what it is, and you're learning about the laws and learning about how to preserve things at the same time. So we've been trying to get creative on how we do our different outreach beyond just the booths and the workshops and things like that. And if you ever go to our website, there's an entire section on this, like the outreach materials we've created. We even created a game where kids get to learn about the history of Nevada by going around and playing this game. That's one of the many things. So that's it. I was trying to make it short and sweet, but I'm happy to answer questions.
Yeah. So yeah, feel free to take yourself off mute, ask a question, type it into the chat, and I'll go back to Facebook and see if we have any additional questions there. Also, I have a question. When will be your next training?
Our next training is actually in 2 weeks, but it's full. Our next open training is March 27th. And to get involved in that, either just email me. I could go back. I can share the screen again so you can see my email address.
Okay. Thank you.
This one there at the bottom of this thing. That's my email address. So feel free to email me and I will get you signed up.
All right. So March 27th. And like I said, I'll go ahead and check Facebook again, refresh. Looks like everything's fine there. Any questions from anyone on the call? Awesome. Well, thank you, Samantha, for being our first speaker of the new year, 2021.
Thank you for inviting me.
Of course. And then thank you everyone for joining us. So appreciate you spending your evening with me. Have a great night and talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.